Welcome back, everybody. This is our fourth video. We're in the Get Started section of the book. If you haven't seen that, I'll tell you what page, but there's a picture of a stomach and a brain all hooked together and trying to figure out how that all works. And these are things I wish I had known when I started my fitness journey 15 years ago. I got pretty big and I didn't know, and I tried all these fad diets. I would yo-yo everywhere. And I finally started to put the secrets, I guess, into play. I had to learn a lot, the Eat to Live, Not Live to Eat book. I'll show you that. I think I've shown that in the past. That was some of the early books that talked about this concept of nutrient rich or nutrition density. So every piece of food that you have or comes across your plate has a level of density of stuff that your body uses. So think of nutrient rich or dense food as food that your body can use for repair, energy, whatever. It's part of the keep the engine running. And it's amazing how our body and our brain and the sensors that have been built into us. When God said we were fearfully and wonderfully made, it's incredible. If you go clear back, before, my grandparents were farmers, and the amount of time it would take them to make a meal. If you had potatoes, you had to go pick them out. If you had apples, you had to go pick them off a tree. If you had to have meat, they went out and killed something. So if they didn't kill it, pick it, or pull it out of the ground, it just didn't get eaten. And it would take a lot of work. So if you go back and look at that amount of time that it took to make the food and get it ready to eat, and then you eat it, it's a big process. It took a long time. I still remember some of those meals as a kid. But as you get that food, that is food that's got a punch. It hasn't been refined by us humans. It's as raw as you can get. A lot of us today will say, that tastes yucky. I don't really like it. We're going to come back to that. Now, what happens is when you eat food, your stomach has, so your hands are kind of like the claws that grab it. You jam it in your mouth, your teeth grind it, you have saliva, it gets, and then you put it out in your stomach goes and start breaking it apart. And then there's different kind of screens, if you will, that are looking for nutrients. And the body's like, okay, they just sent me a load of stuff. Can I use this for energy? Can I use this? Is it good stuff? Or is it all fluff? And if there's fluff and not enough stuff, you'll get a command to your head that says, eat more, eat more. So the body keeps saying, eat, 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 until your nutrient level can get to where your body can work. That's the first clue that you might be having problems is, what kind of food are you eating? If you eat a whole bunch of food that doesn't have very many nutrients, you may get full, but you're not satisfied. You're still getting this request, eat, 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 because you haven't provided your body with anything that can use. That's happened over centuries, years of where they refine the food, they grind it up for us. It's so much easier to go to the vending machine and get a candy bar. And that's kind of what's interesting, as our bodies were designed for a certain type of input, and we now have a different input, and we haven't trained our mind into how that, at least for me, that was my issue. I would get up and think, I'm just going to have some granola bars and a cup of coffee, and that'll be fine. And then 3 hours later, I'm starving. I go to the vending machine. I'm going to have some Mountain Dew because I'm tired, and some M&Ms. And then that would get me to lunch, where I'd go have a pizza and a Coke. And then around 3, I'd be like, oh man, I can't. So I'd have to have some more coffee or more Mountain Dew or or an energy drink, and maybe have a Milky Way. And then at dinner, we'd go out and have I won't mention fast food, but a fast food burger and fries. And then by 11 o'clock at night, I'm hungry again. I said, a bowl of ice cream would be nice. That was pretty common. I mean, that kind of sounds disgusting to me now. But at the time, I did that for years. I kept getting bigger. So I would try to run. I'd try to lift. I'd try to starve myself. None of that worked, ever. It might work for a little while, but then I would come back. Because I hadn't connected that my body's looking for nutrients. And when I don't give it to it, it keeps sending the command, eat, eat, eat. And as I ate, I got bigger and bigger. That's kind of what we're going to talk about in the next couple episodes, is what do I mean by nutrient-rich food. Good idea is, if you didn't pick it, pull it, or shoot it, it probably is not very full of nutrients. If you look on the back of every label, it'll show you things like proteins, fats, carbs, and added sugar. And then there's a whole bunch of the ions, the potassiums, the sodiums. We're going to talk about those in the next video. But for now, what I'd like you to do is start paying attention to a hint of how rich nutrient food is look at the carbs, the carbohydrates. It'll have a number of grams, and if it says it's got 36 grams of carbs, then go over and look at the added sugar. The added sugar should be less than 10% of the total carbs. So if you have 36 carbs, the added sugar should be 3.6. If it's 10 or 15, you know they've added sugar to the mix. I was just looking, I was getting ready to have a candy bar, and I looked at it at 38 grams of carbs, and then there was 36 grams of sugar. It's all sugar. So why is it that we started taking this food, refining it, and then adding sugar? There's been a lot of talk about this as maybe the food companies, we should sue them because we're all fat. And I was like, they're a company. They're designed to create a good or a service that people will pay for. And they tend to move in the direction of money. So, if they could take some ground up newspaper and add maple syrup and brown sugar, we'd probably buy it. And they call it a health brick. And it has no value at all. Sugar wasn't designed early on to be what it is today. There wasn't much sugar in natural food, which if you go and look at our mouth, our tongue, look at our tongue, and it's got regions on it of, where it's, I've got a picture here. It's in the book. There's a picture of a tongue. They have spicy stuff and sour stuff. I remember in high school, we had a biology class, and we were testing those, and they would squirt stuff and you could tell the sensation. I don't know if they still do that. Probably not. But the biggest area is for sweetness, is for sugar. So it's almost the whole center section is for sugar. And you're like, well, why is the surface area of our tongue so big to pick up sugar? Well, when you're eating some of that raw food, original food, it didn't have a lot of sugar in it. And the body wants to know, it doesn't want to miss it, because it does give you a little bit of a rush. Hey, I got something good. It was enjoyable. And then what it also does is it sends another signal saying, hey, we need to pump a little bit of insulin in here because their blood sugar is going to adjust some. But because this food doesn't digest very fast, the insulin will hit about the time the sugar does, so we don't get a fluctuation in our blood sugar. That's how it's supposed to work, is your blood sugar management throughout the day is pretty important. I now have a daughter-in-law and a niece that have, they have to have injections. They have diabetes, and it's amazing what they do to prick themselves, measure where they're at, and then either give them shots or have pumps to do what most of us have built in, is this process of regulating our blood sugar, because if it gets too high or too low, you'll pass out, or you're just not good. It's not good to see that when you're around it. You want to get somebody some candy real quick if they're too low, so that it goes into the body real fast. But now let's go back to my original sample of food that I was telling you about. I started off with coffee with a lot of creamer and sugar. And so when I would hit that, my tongue would be like, yeah, this is great. And it would send a command, hey, blood sugar, shoot up, insulin. So I'd send out a blast of insulin, but that food would absorb so fast in my body way before the insulin hit. So now my blood sugar would shoot up from the sugar, and then as it comes down, then the insulin hits. So I get this boom, and it's about 2 to 3 hour cycle. So, by the time the mid-morning comes around, I hit the crash, and I feel in my head, well, I've got to do something. I need more coffee, or I need caffeine, or an energy drink, or M&Ms, which are sugar. So you drink all that stuff, you get the rush of sugar, your blood sugar takes off, your insulin got pumped, and then it shoots down. So you literally, if you look at the ebb and flow of our blood sugar, it's a lot. And that's what causes the mood swings. That's what causes your energy shifts, all that stuff. So then the problem is you've got this idea that your body's trying to pull the nutrients out of the food. We're feeding it with sugary substances that are highly processed. Your stomach is saying, where's the beef? So it's sending constant commands, feed me, feed me, feed me. You're feeding it stuff that's not very good. You're getting a high level of sugar. So now you've got your blood sugar on, and you just feel terrible. And because there's so little nutrients, your body says, I'm going to store that for a rainy day. Your body's designed to keep you alive. So now you have all this nutrition denseless food, and your body's like, I'm going to store it. So guess what? Women, it sends a store on the waist, and men, the big belly, and next is you start building this fat storage. Stored energy is fat, and it's a vicious cycle. And it's, if you look at how accessible that kind of food is, that's why the food companies are making it. We buy it. You can regulate it all you want, but unless you have a little bit of an understanding that the food that you're eating or could be eating, if you look at that sugar to carb ratio, if it's high sugar, highly refined, I would guess you're having a cycle, and I would guess you're having a trouble with your weight. We are what we eat, even if we don't know what it is. You can't outrun a bad diet. You can't outlift a bad diet. You have to learn what you're eating. You have to realize that your body was designed to work in a certain way. And so when you start eating food that is more unrefined and more raw and more nutrient rich, what happens is your stomach will say, hey, brain, stop the food request. We got enough. So you will actually, there's a lot of food suppressants that people will take. If you just start eating good stuff, your body will naturally start shifting away from the eat, feed me. It's like, hey, I got it. Now, what will also happen is it took a while. It took me about a month to kind of come off of my, I would say, sugar addiction. My ratio of carb to sugar was so high, it was overwhelming. And it took a while. You'll realize sugar's everywhere. To try to drive that sugar back down. And then what'll happen is your mental connection to your food, where you would go to have a bowl of ice cream when you're depressed. Well, you'll start realizing that's not. So then depression, I dealt with all this stuff. It's like, I can't have a candy bar anymore. I can't have some donuts. When you start to realize that those food are feeding the vicious cycle that is causing you to be at risk of a heart attack or whatever, bad knees, bad everything, you actually have to go through a phasing off. And, headaches, you might start having headaches, you might start having bad breath. There's a bunch of stuff. It'll last a couple of weeks to a month. And what I had to do is tell myself, this is my body reprogramming, and it's getting rid of those toxins, and I just have to tough it out. And you will too. But then what a strange thing happens after 30, 60 days of trying to clean up your food. All of a sudden, you'll not eat as much, because you're just naturally, when your body says I'm full, it means I have the nutrients I need. We don't need to keep sending the food command. And then what happens is, as your body gets those nutrients and starts absorbing them, it does send off that endorphin, and you get this feel-good sensation after a healthy series of meals, where it's just sort of like when it hits you, you're just like, so it's a wonderful thing if you haven't experienced it, when you can actually taste a radish and you're like, wow, or lettuce, or you start tasting food, and your other areas of your tongue start to come alive that were numbed by all the sugar. Food starts to be amazing. Salads become amazing. Healthy food becomes amazing. Broccoli, believe it or not, you say, wow, that's good. It's like stuff that you would have thought, well, I can't eat this because it's yucky. Well, it's yucky because you're so used to eating the highly concentrated, refined sugar to get you that initial rush. And the problem is, with the initial rush that you get while you're eating it, will be followed by a crash that you then have to go and fill with food again. Where if you start eating more clean food and more nutrient-rich food, your body doesn't ask you to eat so much, and then your body will reward you after the meal, and it'll last for hours, way more than that initial rush of the injection of sugar. It's the craziest thing, and I know that if you may not believe that, but I experienced it, and it's amazing. So our bodies are fearfully and wonderfully made. Our stomach does have sensors that is looking for, is this got stuff I can use? If not, keep feeding me. And then the stuff that we're feeding us has highly refined, a lot of sugar, so that our body says, yay, this is good. And so it kind of has that sticking factor, and you get this mental connection that when I eat this, I feel good. Well, now you've created a business, if you're a food company, that you keep buying the candy bars and all of it. And it's cheap to make, easy to make, fill with sugar, and your body becomes addicted to it. The only way to combat it is to learn about it. Is say, oh, well, this is how my body works. And I fought it, guys. I fought it. I can remember Steve. He's, Kevin, you just can't eat like this. You're putting sand in the bearings. And what I would do is challenge him. I say, you know what? I'm going to prove you wrong. So I'm going to eat the way you want me to eat, and I'm going to prove that doesn't work. And sure enough, the fat started coming off, the muscles, my energy levels went up, and I became a master's athlete. And I'd be like, wow. So that was how I did the mental gymnastics, is I'm going to prove you wrong. And it was right. And we're going to get into that. And I want you to start thinking about, what are you eating? Lay it out, plan it out. How often are you eating? Typically your breakfast is a big deal. What are you kind of eating? And look at the carb rating and the percent sugar. Is if the sugar is more than 10%, start taking steps to get down there. That would be my first request. Next video, we're going to get into the macros, macro profiling, the IMs that I mentioned. But nutrient-rich food is more unrefined. It's not not processed. It's more as it was. If you didn't pick it, plant it, or shoot it. And I know there's a lot of different thoughts out there, but that's just kind of a mass thing to say. But try to start looking at your food, paying attention to your food. Then when you start eating the right stuff, all of a sudden your energy levels go up. Now you start feeling, I think I might go for a walk. And you can create a positive out of this. If you continue eating the high refined foods, the blood sugar cycle, it's literally a death spiral. It's like the other white powder is sugar and refined foods. And you have to learn to understand how they affect your body. And when you do, you will start to be on your way. The fat will start melting off, the energy will come up, and you'll have an incredible opportunity to do things that you never once thought possible. And I guess I'm speaking from experience. And you've seen all that, so I'm not going to go through that. We've almost gone 20 minutes. I'm trying to keep these to 20 minutes. So that would be your assignment, is to learn how your brain and your stomach work together. Look at your date, even put a journal together. And I'll show you the book, the Stay Tuned journal has a place to enter your food. And I'll look at people's food. If you want to do that, what time did you eat? What did you eat? And just start keeping a track of a journal. You are what you eat, even if you don't know. You are what you eat, even if you don't know what you're eating. Your body knows. And so your composition of what you eat is kind of the composition that you become. And as you adjust that, it takes work. If it's easy, everybody would be doing it. But it can be done, and you can change the trajectory, and you can improve, and you can reduce your dependency on pharmaceutical drugs and prescriptions to counter the effects of our weight. It's incredible, and I hope that you'll do it and enjoy this session. I'll put it up here soon. I'll put little pictures up here in the corner, and then you can maybe follow along in the book. You guys take care, and we'll be in touch soon. Bye-bye.